What's up, everyone? Today we're going to be talking about what is a comic book editor, featuring Heather Antos. Here we go. You're listening to Draw and Talk, a show about indie comics and making comics, with your host, Tyler Carpenter. Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your boy, Tyler. Welcome to another episode of Draw and Talk, where we talk about indie comics and how to make comics. So today I have a super awesome and amazing guest on the show. Her name is Heather Antos, and she is going to educate the crap out of you on what exactly a comic book editor is and how to slay the game in the comic book editor game. So if you haven't seen her work, go to heatherantos.com or check out her Twitter handle below. But seriously, if you haven't heard of her and you want to make comics, then you should probably go check her out on Twitter like right now. So Heather, thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh my gosh, what an intro. I feel like pressure's on now. It was so chill beforehand. No, thank you for having me. This is super fun. Let's talk comics,
Let's talk comics. So really quick, for those who don't know Heather, tell us a little about yourself, how you got into comics, and then kind of what projects that you have worked on in the past and current projects you're working on right now, so people can start buying this stuff.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so I broke into the comic scene, maybe like 5 years ago now. I was always a fan of the medium. In college, I was writing for a bunch of different websites, doing comics journalism, going to conventions, meeting people. But that wasn't enough for me. I've always been a creator and wanted to be in the scene. And so I started poking around to the sort of things that people get paid to do in comics. And I knew I wasn't really interested in writing. I wasn't interested in drawing. But every single comic had this mysterious role called the comic book editor. And I knew, well, I know exactly, because I knew what a traditional publishing editor does, but comics are so different than that. There's art. There's so many other people involved. It's not just an author-editor relationship. And so I was very curious by this fact. And so I did what every good millennial does when they have a question. And I just began tweeting at different editors on the internet. And I was just like, I'm going to be at C2E2. Are you going to be at C2E2? Let's have a conversation. I'll buy you a coffee. And that's actually how I ended up meeting Jordan White, who was later my boss at Marvel. I met him at C2E2, and we just sat down, had a conversation. He kind of broke down what it is an editor does. And I just kind of knew walking out of that convention, that's it. That's what I want to do. And having already graduated college, it was too late for me to get an internship at any publisher. So I then decided I was going to create my own internship.
Nice.
As it were. Just to kind of showcase, this is what I can do. And so I spent a summer putting together a giant comics anthology called Unlawful Good, an Anthology of Crime. 17 short stories by 50 different creators from all over the world. Put it up on Kickstarter, got it funded. By the time 6 months later, New York Comic Con came around, where I ran into Jordan White again, and I said, hey, look what I've done since the last time you talked. I took your advice and I ran with it. And we talked a little bit and stayed in touch after the convention. And about a month later, Marvel was hiring, and he shot me an email and was like, hey, do you want to interview? And the rest is history. I moved to New York, worked at Marvel for a little more than 3 years. I helped launch their Star Wars comics line. I was one of the co-creators of Gwen Pool. Worked on all the Deadpool books, killed Deadpool, brought Deadpool back a couple of times, and various other little projects here and there in between. Did some Spider-Man stuff. And since leaving Marvel, I now freelance as a comics editor for a bunch of different image projects, most notably Redlands Injection and the soon-to-be coming out Bitterroot, as well as do some writing in comics and games now. So it's all crazy. My life is nerdism.
That's the dream, though, is to be able to do something that you love full time. And I feel like now is the best time. We live in the best era to do that, where you could start a YouTube show all about Sonic the Hedgehog, and you just talk about Sonic the Hedgehog, and you could make money off of that, and you decided, I want my work to be nerddom, and that's what you've surrounded yourself with.
Yeah, it's really weird, because when I was describing it, I think it was a Star Wars interview I was doing, I was always a huge Star Wars fan growing up. Like played the tabletop RPG games and everything, had all the books, action figures. And it's a thing that you do with nerd friends is you sit around, the cafeteria table and say, wouldn't it be cool if, and you pitch all your crazy ideas. And then, fast forward to what life was like for me when I was working on the property was now I'm sitting at Lucasfilm around a table with a bunch of Star Wars nerds being paid to say, wouldn't it be cool if, and then that stuff becomes reality. It's crazy.
And it's canon. It's canon.
It's like, I still I don't think I fully appreciated the power that I wielded,
I mean, you've made a dent in the Star Wars universe. I mean, all those, is it Legacy or the old ones that don't count anymore?
The EU, the expanded universe.
Yeah, Legends. You've replaced them.
I know, it's crazy. And and I was the official translator for BB-8 for a short period.
What?
It's let me brush off the dirt off my shoulders. No big deal. It's crazy the things that you can get paid to do as a nerd. So if you have a dream, follow it.
No, it's so true. And I love the books Redlands. I mean, it's Jordy's book. I mean, I've always known her as a colorist, but then her writing was super awesome with the witches. But then also, I love Injection. I'm not gonna lie though, I've read the first 2 volumes of Injection. I have no idea what's going on. It's such. I read the first volume and I was like, this is really interesting. I have no idea what's going on, but this is really interesting. So then I picked up the second volume and I was like, I still don't know what's going on, but this is still really interesting. Maybe it's Warren Ellis's writing. I don't know.
Warren is not a traditional writer, and which has, like anything, has its pros and cons. I think Injection, when the final volume gets out, a lot of it is going to make a lot more sense, because each arc is following a different character, essentially, about this, big picture thing that's, I don't want to spoil too much for people who haven't read it. If you haven't, you should. It's Warren Ellis, Declan Shalvey, Jordy Belair. It's fucking amazing. And I'm not just saying that because I work on it. It started before I worked on it. So, but it's about this injection that is out in the world, and so you're getting glimpses of it from different perspectives. So you aren't supposed to really know what is going on, aside from the fact that what is going on isn't good.
So I guess I am understanding it pretty well.
Yeah. You can see perfect. Just but volume 4 is gonna start coming out next year, early next year, and so more of the mystery will be revealed, and it'll be great.
No, that's exciting. So let's segue now into what your role then is on these books as a comic book editor. I mean, in the indie world, the forums that I'm part of, it's always about, I'm looking for a writer, or I'm looking for an artist, and then there's hey, I'm an editor, and everyone's like, I don't need you. And yet in every mainstream, it's the big comic books, there's always an editor. So clearly this is a very important role. What is an editor, Heather?
An editor is your first set of eyes. It's your first set of eyes that aren't existing in you, the storyteller's head. I think it's a very common thing for newer creators to say, oh, I don't need an editor, because a lot of people view an editor as this evil overlord that is going to come in and put their greasy fingerprints all over your hard work, and they're going to just ruin it and rip it to shreds, and nobody wants that, right? But that's not what an editor does. Well, if an editor does do that, they're a bad editor. But
so there you go, right there. Bad editor move right there. Don't do that.
Yeah, bad editor move. At least wash your hands first. But an editor's job is to make your book the very best that it can be. And sometimes that means saying like, hey, this scene isn't working. What do you think if we tried this? An editor, I think, can be your best friend as a creator because they're a sounding board. They're a trusted sounding board who understands story, and narrative and world building and understands, comic book pacing and understands the production side and has relationships with publishers. And, first and foremost, aside from all the creative stuff that I do, I like to make my job, I like to view my job as to make the creator's job as easy as possible. So that means I will handle all the scheduling. I will talk to the publisher so you don't have to talk to the publisher. I will talk to the marketing people so you don't have to talk to the marketing people. All you have to do is hit these deadlines and create. You don't have to worry about any of the outside noise, unless you want to. And because, if you're a writer, as a writer, you don't want to have to talk to retailers. You don't want to have to talk to the publisher. You don't want to have to talk to print production. You don't want to have to talk, you just want to write. And so I will handle all that stuff for you. I will only bother you with questions when, it's impertinent. But aside from that, you just write the damn book, that you want to be writing.
That's crazy that you're doing all these things. I thought it was just you're the other set of eyes. You're editing. You're like the liaison of the creative team. I mean,
and that's what it is at a publishing house too. Like that was my job at Marvel. My job is to be that point man, that streamlined, helm of communication, basically, an organization, so that all the creators need to focus on is creating and doing the best job that they can do. And when something comes up that concerns them, that's when that conversation will happen. I think first and foremost, that's just a lovely asset to have as a creator.
yeah. I want one now.
Right, exactly. So that's the project managing side of what I do as an editor. But then as a story consultant and the creative side is literally that first set of eyes. It's to, look at your pitch and say like, well, I don't think you have a strong enough hook that's going to, catch the attention of this specific publisher that you say you want to pitch to. Have you considered this publisher? I think this book is more of a fit with them. Or, I'll help creators who don't have a full creative team put together yet. And I have this great network of freelancers that I've worked with and know, and I can help cast. Aside from, again, as we've talked about, the story stuff. Mm-hmm. And then the artists and the layouts and giving notes on that and colors and letters and doing proofreading, what everyone seems to think an editor's only job is.
But apparently it's not. You are, you're kind of like a marketer. You're marketing the book, you're sending emails, you're talking to everyone. I feel almost now bad for the editor. I hope they're paying you enough.
Editors are probably some of the least paid in comics. In
Your name should be on the cover, at least.
I like to equate a comic book editor very similar to like a TV or film producer. It's my job to pitch projects, to cast projects, to maintain budget, to maintain schedule, and to ensure the best product goes out as possible. And that is a lot of hats to wear, which is why there's not a lot of people who go for the position.
Yeah, it's true. Like everyone's like, I want to be a comic book writer, a comic book artist, because they're like the celebrities in the TV shows. They're the ones that are gonna have the celebrity status, when you got the editor on the side who's like, don't worry, I'll schedule all these things for you.
I'll make sure you show up on time. It's fine. But like I don't know. I love that. I love it. It's a challenge. I love challenges. I live for challenges. Like, I don't know, like it's one of those things where, again, as I said, like when I was breaking in, I didn't really have an interest in writing, not because I didn't like writing. I love writing. But I think for me, it was part of oh yeah, I could write. If I wanted to write, I could write. That's fine. Like I need a bit of a challenge to myself. And I feel like being an editor, there's so many boxes that you need to check for a single comic. Now do that 6 times a week, 20 times a month. You know,
flip. So what's the most challenging thing? I mean, maybe give an example of like a project that you worked on where maybe something was going wrong and it was up to you. I don't know, to solve it. I mean, I'm sure you've come across that. Can you give us a story of that?
I mean, I don't want to be too specific. You
can just say like there's a writer and an artist.
Yeah, I mean, like you get challenges from all sorts of angles in comics. I mean, sometimes it's a situation where you have a writer miss a deadline, and well, if the writer misses a deadline, that affects the penciler, which then affects the inker, which then affects the colorist, which then affects the letterer, which then affects the end. You know, and it's not the penciler's fault that the writer screwed up, but you might have to take pages away from the penciler, which means a job. That's, pencilers get paid per page. And well, if you take it away from that penciler, well, that means his inker just lost a couple pages too. And a colorist might, but also not only are you taking away pages, but you have to figure out which pages to take away, which pages make the most sense for a story to take away. Well, on top of that, you also want to make sure that artistically the artists that you're casting to fill in these pages also make sense to fit in with the end product of the book. Meanwhile, you're also working on the same story, but a different arc that comes out afterwards because of scheduling reasons. Well, now you have to talk with the writer to make sure that those scripts aren't going to fall behind, so that you have to do the same thing again with another project. Like you run into stuff like that all the time, and like, shit happens, life happens, whatever. You have to deal with it. You have to problem solve, because at the end of the day, that deadline's not changing.
Yeah.
When that book goes to print, it's not changing. And sometimes you get not problems, but you get challenges from higher up in the company. Sometimes specific instance I will say is, sometimes sales and marketing, they'll be looking at that previews catalog before previews catalog goes to print, and they're like forecasting what the budget for the month is going to be, essentially. And they look at it and they decide, we don't have enough content. We need to come up with something last minute. So we need to create a project out of thin air.
Oh, wow.
Deadpool office. Do an 80-page, $10 Deadpool book. So an 80-page, to get into context, like previews comes out 3 months before an issue actually hits the shelves. So like previews just released November solicits like a week ago. So that's 3 months from now. So we had 3 months to come up with an 80-page Deadpool comic and get it written, drawn, and sent to print. A normal 20-page comic takes 4 to 6 weeks to draw alone. So and we did it, we did it. We came up with a concept. It was Deadpool 13. It was a mini crossover event between Power Man and Iron Fist, Daredevil and Deadpool, and just made it this insular one shot. And we outsourced to the other creative teams, and we had Charles Soule write the Daredevil part of it, and we had David Walker write the Luke Cage and Iron Man Fist part of it, and Jerry bookended the Deadpool, but we had 4 different art teams working all at the same time. And it's just, you get these challenges and you have to figure out the best way. You have to figure out how to still come up with this kick-ass product that people are still going to like, and have no clue how late you were at the office sweating over this.
And within that 3 months, now we need to start marketing this book. Let everyone know that we're making it and it's coming out. That's a lot of work. Holy crap.
And while you're doing all the other books that you already knew you had to do.
And it must be hard because, you're working for a huge, Marvel isn't just like a company. This is a corporation. Yeah. And they're huge. And when a higher up says, Heather, we need this done, you can't really be like, they're like, we want this now. That's crazy. Yeah. I never thought about that as when you said, if the penciler can't finish, he doesn't have time to finish that book, you have to take away pages from him or her, which means money. I never thought about that. Yeah, it's someone's job, and so like it's always a thing where like if a penciler or inker is late, and then I have to split, colorists, like it used to piss. Well, it still does. It pisses me off so much as an editor because I'm just like, I get it, life happens, all of these things, but like communication, just always communicate, and so we can problem solve together. But like, this is someone's job. Mm-hmm. This is someone's livelihood you are affecting, and it's such a selfish thing, and it just makes me so bad. So note to writers, either if you're not going to make your deadline, communicate, but let's be real, you can write, because drawing a comic book page is a lot longer than you typing. It's a lot longer than falling writing. Off a building. Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, I feel like it's a thing that people just don't think about. It's like you're literally affecting someone's livelihood. And comics doesn't pay much. So like you might really be affecting someone's ability whether or not to pay their rent that month. And that sucks. Next time I read a comic book and I see there's 2 artists on there, I'm just going to be like, oh. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, like it's you never know who, right? Like sometimes it could be the editor that messed up. You don't know. Yeah, I just know that somewhere in this pool, something went wrong. Something went wrong. Yep. Wow, that's crazy. So, Heather, what can you? I try to keep these shows less than 30 minutes because I think people's attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. What advice can you give to someone who wants to be an editor? And what's some advice you can give to people who are trying to break into comics? I mean, it goes hand in hand. I think if you want to be an editor, then edit. Like you're not going to get paying jobs right off the bat. You're going to make mistakes. First, I look at my first project. I was looking at it just the other day even, and I look at it, and I'm so proud of it because it's a thing that I did and I made not knowing what the hell I was doing. But at the same time, I also look at it, and I look at it as a thing that I made when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. But you know what I like is you made an opportunity for yourself. There wasn't an opportunity, so you made yourself an opportunity, and that opportunity was you were able to succeed in it. And then when you show up, you're like, hey, check what I did. I finished this. I made this. Exactly. And that's something that I think is so cool about comics is if you want to make comics, then make comics. And guess what? You're making comics. Like, the options are limitless today with like Comixology and Webtoons and like, Tumblr. You can have your own comic, and it might not be, your big dream project, but if you want to do it, the tools are out there and they're accessible. And, you can just start doing it and building an audience and meeting people. Like, I think that is one of the biggest things is like network with your class of comics creators. When I was breaking into comics, there was a hashtag that was around that I don't really see too often right now. But I like to say it with my class of comics, we always used to, when we talked about process stuff, we used the hashtag make comics. Mm-hmm. And that was like me and Chris Sabella and Steve Orlando and Max Visaggio and, all of these people that at the time were just amateurs, just self-publishing. And now we're all pros working in the industry, network and figure out who your class of comics is, because you guys are going to be the ones that are going to be coming into the scene together and recommending each other for jobs and, working together, et cetera, et cetera. And then, but yeah, just as an editor, if you want to edit, just start editing. You're going to kind of have to whore yourself out for free for a little bit. That's just how it goes. But eventually one day, someone's going to offer to pay you, or one day you'll feel like you're comfortable enough asking for a rate. And, talk with editors, meet editors. No one ever comes to me and asks
teach me about comic editing. Everyone wants to know how to break in as a writer and artist. So I think you will quickly catch an editor's ears saying, like, tell me about you, about your job. What do you do? And just find that mentor and yeah, just like any other creative field, you know, find a mentor and just start doing the work.
Boom. Thank you so much, Heather, for coming on the show. This was really insightful for me.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Thank you for having me. This was super fun.
Everyone, you can find Heather on Twitter at Heather Antos, or you can go on her website, www.heatherantos.com. You can check out her Marvel, her image work. I'm on her website right now. It's super awesome. And if you need a freaking awesome editor, you can hire her, it looks like.
I'm in the middle of a rebuild right now, so excuse it while I'm figuring out the rebuild.
No, it looks super good. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Hit the subscribe button and the like button. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments section. Thank you. Thanks for listening to another episode of Drawn Talk. Hit the subscribe button, like, and comment. And once again, thanks for supporting me. You guys rock.